tell me about, so another, you mentioned, and again, you don't spend a lot of time, but you do mention Stoics and Stoicism briefly. And the only reason I ask this is because, especially right now in our culture, thanks to people like Jordan Peterson and other, there's a refamiliarization with things having to do with, what is it? Guys think about Roman Empire 5 times a day or something like that meme that's going around.
Yeah.
I know friends who, they aren't religious at all, but they're reading Marcus Aurelius. I have a Muslim friend who reads Stoicism and is trying to live a Stoic life. So there's an interest.
Stoic devotionals.
What is Stoicism? For those who don't know, just what is it? And is it something Christians should pay attention to? Should we learn from? Is there anything you can glean from it? Just give us a quick Cliff Notes of Stoicism.
Yeah. Very early on in Christianity, Christians were mistaken for moral philosophers because they had far more in common with moral philosophers than kind of mystery religions, other ancient religions.
Right.
Because Christians were obsessed with what Jews would call righteousness. But with philosophers, they would often talk about the good life. But they're talking about similar things, which is formation and maturity, growing up, becoming a good person, that sort of thing. And what moral philosophers, and Stoics were really popular, what moral philosophers were often talking about was how to live with goodness and integrity. So 2 things are really key for the Stoics. One is imitation of the gods. The idea that the most important thing with life isn't power, isn't wealth, but actually achieving a certain status or level of goodness. And most your average Roman didn't think of the gods as moral.
Right.
They thought they're no more moral than the President of the United States, whichever president you're thinking of. They're no more moral than your senator, whichever senator you're thinking of. And they all follow the degrees of, what kind of mudslinging and all of that. Whereas the Stoics thought, okay, if God is perfect, if the gods are perfect, and then they must be good. And if they're good, then we should imitate them. And the second element of Stoicism is this idea of fate, that we spend so much of our life trying to control where we're going in life. I want this job and this house, this amount of money, this wife or this husband or whatever, these many children. And the Stoics, part of the reason they're called Stoics, the way we get the word Stoic is passive. They weren't passive, but the idea of accepting fate and not having your level of satisfaction of life, your contentment, determined by circumstances. So Seneca famously said, I consider it misfortune that you've never faced I consider it unfortunate that you've never faced misfortune. And his whole point is the more you get acquainted with suffering, the more you'll grow through suffering and become the person you're meant to be. You can see how there are a lot of similarities and overlap between the Stoics and the Christians. Differences would be, they still had some conceptions of class. They would still, generally speaking, believe in Romanization, things like looking down on the cross, looking down on the lower class, that sort of thing. But, for example, I was just reading this morning, Seneca has this wonderful essay on benevolent treatment of slaves. And his whole point is we need to treat slaves more like family than as property. And you're going, how could a Roman have ever said this? He's not a Christian. He's not Jewish. How could he have ever said this? So I think early Christians may have been mistaken sometimes for Roman philosophers, much like the Stoics.
Yes. It's one of those things that, again, I think you can find echoes of common grace. Like you can see that every C.S. Lewis, he said, in math, there's one right answer. and an infinite number of wrong answers. But some of the wrong answers are much closer to being right than others.
Yeah.
And I see when I think about a number of other competing beliefs, either from the ancient or from the modern world, if we're looking for the commonalities, if we're looking for those things, then they can serve as bridges, like the monument to the unknown God did for Paul. So that's why I encourage Dojo viewers to be on the lookout for those things, and don't just dismiss something. Oh, that's Stoic, that's pagan. Yeah, it is pagan, but everything's pagan, and the gospel was given into a world of paganism because God loved the world, which includes pagans. And so, if we can take that approach, then I think it helps. I don't think Christians were circling the wagons back in the Roman Empire. I think they were in the different part. I mean, from Caesar's household all the way down to the slaves, they were in all aspects of society, spreading the aroma of Christ. And
there was actually an apocryphal early, maybe like 4th century writing that was believed to be by Paul, but it's not, called Paul and Seneca. And this idea that in the 1st century, Paul and Seneca were pen pals, and they were writing to each other in dialogue. It's pseudepigraphal, meaning that it didn't actually happen, but they must have caught on to some benevolent similarities that they said, oh, these would have been good dialogue partners.
Yeah.
And they constructed this fake conversation in letter form between the two.
That's pretty cool.
And I think that's just what you're saying. There should be these public conversations that take place where you can give credit where credit's due. Like, I like that philosophy. I like that idea, without saying that's true and right or fully true and right, that sort of thing.
Yeah. That's something that it would be. It shows that the gospel, people who follow the gospel, are not threatened by other belief systems. We're not threatened by competing ideologies. We think this is true, and so we want to. I mean, at its best, that's what apologetics is providing a winsome response and engaging with counter arguments. Now, at its worst, apologetics just becomes arguing and puffing up and who can win debates. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can be done winsomely, and I see it as you have to be familiar with the world in which you're moving in order to have those discussions and to find those commonalities. And then you're better able to see what our actual differences are. And we don't waste time arguing about stuff that we already agree on, or that we're like, yeah, okay, that's cool.